Shalom Aleichem and welcome everyone as we are preparing for Shabbat, Parshat Teitze. We're in the middle of Chodesh Elul, today being Yud Gimel of Elul, which is the yahrzeit of the Ben Ish Chai. Today, Be'ezrat Hashem, I was asked to learn Refuat Shelema Tinok Ben Sarah. I should have a complete Refuah B'karov. So we'll start off a little bit about the Ben Ish Chai, and then we'll get into the Parsha. The story I want to say over is actually not a story happened with the Ben Ish Chai himself. It actually happened with the father of the Ben Ish Chai, Hara Chaim. Harav Eliyahu, his father, that was his name, Eliyahu. And the story goes that every Motzei Shabbat, after he finished Havdalah and he did everything at home, he would take money and he would go to the poor of Baghdad, in the city that they lived, and he would knock on the door late at night, Motzei Shabbat. And the people in the house would ask, who's at the door? And he would say, it's Eliyahu. And they would come to the door. Before they came, he dropped the money and he left. And people used to think it was Eliyahu Navi, because he says his name is Eliyahu. And they did this, and he did this week after week for many years. When he was Nifter, and the Ben Ish Chai's father was Nifter, and the money stopped, people were asking, what happened? Where's Eliyahu Navi? And that's when the Ben Ish Chai, in one of his spadim, one of his eulogies for his father, he said that the person who was giving out the money was actually Eliyahu. Wasn't Eliyahu Navi, it was Eliyahu, my father. Eliyahu, my father, was going around and giving tzedakah to all these people. Now he's not here. There's a void in that. I mean, there's a lot of lessons in that story itself, that one person, you yourself, can be Eliyahu Navi for people. But obviously, Maseh Avot Siman Lebanim, the Ben Ish Chai, who became one of the greatest scholars of his time, all the Sephardic scholars that we have today is all really based on the Ben Ish Chai. It was his vision to build Yeshivat Porat Yosef, the yeshiva where Rav Tzadka learned that, Rav Chamovadia learned that, Rav Tzion Abba Shaul was there. Everybody was in that yeshiva Porat Yosef, all built in the zechut of the visionary of Rabbi Yosef Haim, the Ben Ish Chai. Let's start this week's parsha. Ki tetzeh lemilchama al oyevecha. The pasuk says, when you go out against your enemy, untano Adonai Elohecha beyadecha b'shavit shivyo, and Hashem will put him in your hand, and you will capture the enemy. It's very interesting to note that the pasuk starts off plural. Ki tetzeh lemilchama al oyevecha, against your enemy. And then it says, untano, and then Hashem will place him, He's going to place him in your hand. I thought it's my enemy. He should place them. Not untano, him, but rather them. So Rav Bona Mipeshischa learns from here as follows. First of all, a lot of the Mefarshim tells us, who is this enemy that you're going out? Is the Yetzer Hara. So Rav Bona Mipeshischa says this is exactly it. You see, when you go out against the war of the Yetzer Hara, a lot of people, there's many Yetzer Haras. It has a Yetzer Hara to do this, a Yetzer Hara to speak in shul, Yetzer Hara to look at pritzut, a person has a Yetzer Hara to eat non-kosher, a person has a Yetzer Hara to fight with people. There's always many different Yetzer Haras. He thinks he has many enemies. I gotta go fight every single enemy. But then, when he's successful and he fights it, he realizes, untano, it was actually one enemy. And Hashem placed him in his hand. This is the Yetzer Hara himself. We have to understand that there's really just one enemy there. It's the Yetzer Hara. He guises himself, he disguises himself in many different ways, in many different fashions. But in honesty, we only have one enemy to fight. And that is the Yetzer Hara himself. This is the ultimate war. The war of the Yetzer Hara. The Yalkut Ma'am Loez tells us, based on the Divrei Hazal, that the Yetzer Hara's trick is to make you sin a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. In this way, he gets you, as we know, Avera Gerot Avera, one Avera leads to the next. He doesn't make you start with the big Avera, he starts something small, then over here, over there, it's not so bad. The Ma'am Loez brings a mashal to explain. There was a king who took a Jew and told the Jew you have to make Avirah. I'm going to give you a choice. If you don't do the Avirah, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to give you a choice which Avirah you can do. It says A, you can eat non-kosher. B, you can do adultery. You can be with someone you're not supposed to be with. Or you can drink stam yain, non-kosher wine. So you have a choice of being unfaithful to your wife. You have a choice of eating non-kosher or drinking non-kosher wine. So he doesn't know what to do. He says, okay, first thing, zinut, immorality, adultery, that's asur, legamrei. That's the 3 cardinal sins. Not happening. Teref, if I eat non-kosher meat, can get karet. You know, it's you can get heavenly punished for it. He says, but stam yain, just non-kosher wine, that's really derabanan. They were scared of avodah zarah, but today there's no avodah zarah, whatever. He says, you know what? Let me take the wine. The wine is the least. It's a good cheshbon, right? Good cheshbon. Good calculation.
After the wine went inside.
Very good of Yosef. Says, after the wine went inside, he became drunk. And when he was drunk, he decided to eat non-kosher meat. And when he was full of meat and wine, he ended up doing the immoral act of zinut. The Yetzer had convinced him of thinking that drinking wine wasn't so bad, and everything went out the window from there.
So you should other thing? Eat non-kosher?
Well, that was on the mashal to teach us that one avirah really leads to everything else. That's a Yetzer does. He tries to force you into one avirah. He says, you have 5 avirot to do today. You know what? Don't do this one. Don't do that one. It's Yetzer talking. Do this one. This one is mylash. Not so bad. It's not so bad. And then you do it, and he ended up doing everything. The Hatam Sofer tells us exactly how the Yetzer works. He says as follows. He says, imagine there was a man who owned a diamond shop. We have diamond jewelers. And a friend of his walks in and says, listen, I got a ring, but I don't know if it's so good. Can I see one of your fancier rings? I want to compare them. I want to look. He says, sure, you're my friend. Here, take this. This is a really expensive ring. Look at this diamond. So now he's taking his diamond ring and takes the store owner's diamond ring. He looks at them, takes both of them and puts them in his pocket. So the owner says, hello, what are you doing? Give me back my ring. He says, what? It's not your ring. It's my ring. He says, what do you mean it's your ring? It's my ring. They start arguing. So now this guy says, listen, you have an argument with me. So take me to Din Torah. Take me to the Beit Din. He says, okay, let's go. So now this guy who came in to make all this craziness, he says, I cannot go to the Beit Din. Look at me how I'm dressed, my shirt, my this, my that. I need to get some fancier clothes. I have to go representable to the courthouse. I can't go in the shmatas. So he says, okay, don't worry. I have extra clothing. He takes out from him a shirt, a suit, everything. He says, okay, how am I going to get there now? I don't have a donkey. The owner of the store says, I have a donkey for you. Don't worry. Let's go together. Here's your donkey. Here's your suit. Here's your hat. He gives him everything he needs, takes him, and go to the court. They go to the court, and the store owner says to the judge, this guy, he came in. He says, I want you to see my ring, your ring. He takes both rings, he puts it in his pocket, and he says, now it's his. It's mine. Now the judge turns to the second guy and says, what's your defense? And he says, he told you that the ring is his, right? Now he's going to tell you that the shirt I'm wearing, the jacket I'm wearing, and that the shoes I'm wearing, and that donkey outside that I came on is all his. Does it make any sense? Everything is his. I'm here in court, and everything is his. Ask him. So the judge asks the first guy, is everything his? Everything yours? He says, yeah, everything's mine. He says, I don't believe you a word now that you said. It cannot be that you're arguing and you're telling me you gave him a jacket and this and this and this and that. Everything belongs now to this guy. The Yetzer plays a similar ruse with us. He says to us, don't do this mitzvah. Do this avirah. Just give me this, give me that. Little bit. Until he's hijacked our whole body and has taken over as the one in control. The Yetzer is very, very tricky. Not only the Yetzer very tricky, the Yetzer sometimes confuses us as well. The story goes, there was a kamtzan, there was a miser who didn't like to have guests. But the Rav of the shul told him, listen, you got to take guests. It's good for you. It's important. So one day, the Rav said, you must take a guest from town today. So he went and he gave him the guest. So the rich man said to his son, listen, we're having a guest tonight. And I don't want to use my money and my fancy food for him. Today, in the marketplace, Erev Shabbat, right before Shabbat, go to the fish store. Find the cheapest fish they have. Whatever they have the most cheapest, that's the one you take, and that's what we're going to serve him. Son said, okay. He goes to the fish store. They're closing up shop. They have a couple of spoiled fishes. And he says, how much is it? They say, well, we're closing up. Just give us a couple of pennies and take it. It's yours. So he says, okay. He comes home and gives it to his dad. And he has the wife prepare it, but it smells. It stinks. The guests come. It's a poor guy that hasn't eaten a whole week. He says, listen, today you're in luck. We have a whole fish for you. Takes out this whole spoiled rotten fish and gives it to the poor guy. Poor guy takes a bite. He can't eat it. The rich man says, listen, you have to eat it. My wife prepared it. I bought it special for you. And he made him eat it. He ate it. And the next day, he finds out that this guy is sick in the hospital. Stomach poisoning. Food poisoning. So now, right? So now he tells his son, we gotta go Bikur Cholim. We gotta go visit him. He goes to visit him in the hospital. And while he's there, they're talking, this and that, the man dies. So now he says to his son, let's go to the Levaya. He goes to the Levaya. He tells his son, wow, I never knew how great Achnasat Orchim is. I did Achnasat Orchim, then I did Bikur Cholim, and now I'm doing Levaya. One mitzvah led to the next. And he thinks he did mitzvot. Same thing, person does Avidah, he ends up doing another Avidah, and he thinks he did mitzvot. It gets very, very confusing. The Yetzer Hara convinces us all sorts of things. We have to be very careful when it comes to the Yetzer Hara. Today, we know the Yetzer Hara is very powerful. The Yetzer Hara is everywhere. That's why the Havetz Chaim says today, when a person does mitzvah, he should do the mitzvah no matter the quality. No matter if he's doing with 100% intention or not. He says today, because we're in the ultimate war with the Yetzer Hara, therefore any mitzvah that we do is already considered very, very valuable to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They bring a mashal that there was a rich man very into art. And he once had some visitors come, and they came through his house, and they saw every type of painting on the walls, all types of arts, modern art, classic art, all types of Renaissance art, beautiful, beautiful art, everywhere. They finally come to the rich man's office, and above his desk where he sits is this painting with just regular coloring. It looks very, very simple. Nothing fancy at all. So the guy says, listen, I have, the guest says, I have a question. I saw all the painting that you had in this house. They were all amazing paintings. And now this one painting here looks out of place, and it's the one in your office, in your study. It's supposed to be the best of the best. So he says, let me tell you about this painting. The artist who painted this painting was actually a very, very good artist. But he got into a terrible accident and he lost both his arms. And he no longer could paint. But he wanted to paint so much, so he started to paint with his toes. And this painting I have here is his masterpiece that he did with his toes. And so because he's such a famous painter and he's trying to paint, to me, it's considered a lot. Likewise, Hashem has billions of angels who carry out his directive with the greatest purity and sanctity. Why not? They do not have a Yetzer Hara. But we humans have so much Yetzer Hara until we squeeze out each mitzvah. That's why it's so valuable, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem knows the challenges that we have in order to get one mitzvah done. And therefore every single mitzvah is counted so much. Now, we talked about the Yetzer Hara and all its, talked about some of its ways it tries to entice us. Now, we need to talk a little bit about how to fight the Yetzer Hara. Okay, so we had lesson 1, how the Yetzer Hara gets us. And now we have to work lesson 2, which is logical, how to fight the Yetzer Hara. So our Chachamim tell us. We'll start with the Hafetz Chaim. The Hafetz Chaim tells us, Ki Teitze le'milchama al oyevecha, is already telling us how to fight the Yetzer Hara. How you fight the Yetzer Hara? You have to go out to fight the Yetzer Hara. Meaning, don't let the battle come to you, but rather you got to get in front of it. You got to get in front of the battle. Teitze means you have to continuously fight the Yetzer Hara. They brought a story that there were two generals in the army, and they were both fighting the enemy. One of the generals got hit, and he tried to, at the battlefield, he was trying to patch himself up. And while he's patching himself up, another bullet came and killed him right in the head. Another general also got hit, but he didn't stop during the battle. He continued to fight and fight and fight till he was able to get to safety. Then he patched himself up. Says the Chachamim as follows: the same thing is true with the Yetzer Hara. You have to go out and fight the Yetzer Hara. Continue to fight it. Don't stop in the middle and say, okay, let me start to fix myself up. That's not the time. The time right now is to fight the Yetzer Hara, to go out and fight it. The same way, if someone is sinking in a quicksand, right, he's got to keep fighting to get himself up. He gives up, he's just going to sink right down. You have to be able to continuously to go out, continuously fight the Yetzer Hara. Don't start to give up. Don't start to say, I can't do it. Person has to fight and fight and fight and get ahead of it. Get ahead of the Yetzer Hara. Before he comes to you, you go to it. As the Hafetz Chaim says.
Going to war.
You have to go to war. Now, how does a person go to war? So we know already this concept, whatever our fathers did, is assigned to us. We have one of our forefathers, one of the most important fathers, the Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu went out to war. Remember? Esav was coming to Yaakov. Yaakov's coming to Esav. He finds out Yetzer wants to come with 400 men to destroy him. So Yaakov comes up with a strategy. What's his strategy? He splits the camp in half. Half here, half there. The Hamim tell us, this teaches an important concept. You have to come up with a strategy to fight the Yetzer Hara. A person cannot just, I'm fighting the Yetzer Hara. He has to have a plan. Teshuvah means, Sur Merav Aseh Tov. You have to go away from the bad and come to the good. You have to have a plan. What's the plan? I saw an amazing concept today. Rav Gamliel Rabinowitz says, he says as follows. He says, in this week's Parshat, we go out to war against the Yetzer Hara. There are 74 mitzvot in the Parshat. 74, Gematria, and to numbers, to the Hebrew letters, comes out to be Ayin Daled. Daled Ayin. Da. To know, to have knowledge. Rabbi Gamliel Rabinowitz says, in order to fight the Yetzer Hara, the strategy is to learn Torah. To know the Torah. Because if you know the Torah, and you know the Halakha, you know what to do. You know how to do. He says, everyone's looking for Segulah. Everyone's looking for a trick on how to fight the Yetzer Hara. So the simplest trick is to learn Torah. Person has to know. No. He says, when a person learns Torah, he's Dalet Ayin, Da, but it's also Ayin Dalet. It's Ed. This is his witness to Teshuvah. The Torah that he learns comes as an Ed, as a witness, and says this person did Teshuvah. So the strategy we have from Yaakov Avinu, who is the resemblance, he is the Ishtam, Yoshevo Alim, he is Torah, that's the strategy. The number one strategy to fight the Yetzer Hara is to learn Torah. Then, Yaakov he gave gifts. Giving gifts, zeh tzedakah. Okay? You have to do tzedakah. Part of doing tshuva is doing tzedakah. As it's the Ben Ish Chai's yard site, let's learn a little piece from the Ben Ish Chai just on this concept of tzedakah. The Ben Ish Chai says in this week's Parshat, it says, Ki tivneh bayit hadash. When you build a new house, v'asita magad gagecha, right? It says you have to make a roof. V'lo tasim damim beveitecha. You don't want someone to fall from there, right? Now, you know the Ben Ish Chai says, what does it mean, Ki tivneh bayit hadash, when you build a new house? It's talking about when you make teshuvah. When you become a new house, when you become a new being, what do you have to do when you become new? When you did teshuvah? When you become new, you make teshuvah, you have to make v'asita makat legagecha. You have to make a roof. You have to make a fence on the roof. You have to make a fence around you, around the Torah, around yourself, so you don't succumb to sin. And then he says, what does it mean? Lo tasim damim bevetecha. You don't want the blood to be on your house. He says damim can also be money. He says "V'lo tasim damim bevetecha." Don't put money into your house. Meaning, don't put money into luxury. Rather, put money into tzedakah, because that's the way tshuva will last. If you're going to put it into your house for luxuries, then you're not going to be able to sustain. Ki yipol hanifol mimenu. He's going to fall from you. Because once you're, like we talked about this on Shabbat a lot, about if a person's too much involved in luxuries, the Torah cannot come into him. So the Spanish guy says, this is how you do tshuva. You do tshuva, you have to build a roof around it. You have to build a fence around the roof, which means you have to build a fence around you and not waste your money on trivialities, but rather invest it in tzedakah. So strategy number 2 that Yaakov Avinu did was Yaakov Avinu did tzedakah. He gave gifts. And the third one, obviously, is that Yaakov did was tefillah. He prayed to Hashem, because this is our ultimate source of power, is our prayer. So we have what? We have tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. Tshuva, we say, is learning Torah. Learning Torah does it. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. That's what we say, takes away the bad gezerot. That's what you have to do. The Ibir Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov Hatzera says, we see this beferish in the word Teitze. How you see it in Teitze? Right? So he says the Tav is tefillah, the Tzaddik is tzedakah, and the Aleph is Or. Which light? Or Shel Torah. Tefillah, tzedakah, and Or. This is how you do tshuva. This is how you fight against the Yetzer. This is how you do it. So we know the strategy to fight. The strategy to fight is first of all to learn Torah, to know what you're doing, how to do it, where to fight, when to do, to get tzedakah, to show you put your money where it belongs, not in your house. Don't put the money in your house, but rather you put the money in tzedakah as investments. And then you also have to, of course, always tefillah. Without tefillah, nothing in the world. Without prayer, nothing works. But I'm going to give you now another understanding what it means. Ki teitze le'milchama. Ki teitze le'milchama. When you go out against war, how do you gain something? How does a person gain? Like just take for example, a person goes to the gym, right? He goes to work out in the sports zal and he wants to get muscles. What does he do? He takes the 5-pounder and he lifts it?
Consistency.
But the 5-pounder is going to do something to him?
Not big.
He's got to take something heavy. He's got to take a challenge. Now, you have to do everything in increments, correct? But you got to go a little bit, challenge yourself. Chazal tell us, you know what Ki Teitze Le'milchama means? You want to go against the Yetzer Hara? You have to come out of your comfort zone. You can't stick in your comfort zone. I'm comfortable with learning only a half hour. That's not going to make you teshuvah. A person has to start to add a little bit more. A person has to go out a little bit more. No one should stay comfortable. If you're going to be comfortable, luxuries, comfort, this lets the Yetzer Hara come in. A person has to challenge himself. He has to go out of his comfort zone. Ki teitze le'milchama al yevecha. You have to go out against your comfort zone. This is a very important concept because people just like to get into the zone. We're comfortable, and that's it. And life is as it is. That's not the way life is supposed to be. It's a continuous battle. And in order to win this battle, you got to keep going out of your comfort zone, to keep growing as a person, to keep doing teshuvah, which means to keep to return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person has to go out of his comfort zone. I saw, while preparing for this, a very interesting mashal, actually a story, they say it's a mashal, that in 1917, in the Russian Revolution, right, the Bolsheviks, and this whole Marxist agenda was that you have to give everything to the state. A person shouldn't have its own private holdings, but rather everything should be shared equally. So agents were sent across the entire Russian mainland to make sure that the citizens would keep the law, that if you owned whatever you owned, you have to split half of it with the government. All right? You have to give half of it to the government. So one day, an agent arrived in a small remote village and knocked on the first door he saw. An old peasant opened up. And the agent said, I have a few questions for you. He said, okay, go ahead. He says, I have a question. If you had 2 farms, what would you do with them? So the man says, what question? One for me, one for Mother Russia. Says to them, great. Now, what about if you had 2 herds? What would you do? He says, what's the question? one for me, one for Mother Russia. So that you only had 2 sheep. What's the question? One for me, one for Mother Russia. Every time you ask him a question, you own this, this, and this. He says, one for me, one for you, one for your Mother Russia. He says to him, what happens if you have 2 chickens? All of a sudden, he wasn't able to answer this one. So the agent tells him, I don't understand. I asked if you have 2 farms, you say one to Mother Russia, one for you. Everything, one for me, one for you. It came to 2 chickens, and all of a sudden you're not answering one for Mother Russia, one for you. He says, because 2 chickens I actually have. So when I don't have it, it's one for you, one for me. It's fine, I'm able to give it up. But if I actually own it, it's very hard for me to say one for Mother Russia, one for that. It takes a similar concept that when something's easy and comfortable, that's it, we don't want to deal with it. Well, I don't have it, sure. You have to get out of your comfort zone. A person has to go a little bit out of it. A person has to make himself. That's what it says. Elul is anila dodi v'dodi. Many ways to understand this, but I saw a couple of weeks ago, anila dodi v'dodi means anila dodi. If I'm for Hashem, how much I give to Hashem, how much I go out of my comfort zone for Hashem, that's how much Hashem gives me. That's what the pasuk says. That means when you go out of your comfort zone, that's how much Hashem gives you into your hand. That's how a person grows. When a person goes out of his comfort zone, a person goes out to make tshuva, he uses his strategy, does those things, then everything comes to him that way. That's why it's a 2-way street. You have to give in order to get. Why is that? Why can Hashem just give? Hashem does give. That's the truth. Hashem always gives. We're nothing. We can't. Anything that we give Hashem, it's actually Hashem giving us to give Him. You understand that, right? Because all the koach comes from Hashem. So whatever we're doing, it's really Him allowing us to do that. But the point is, like the Chafetz Chaim would tell us, in order for you to show that you want it, right? Hashem doesn't want to just give His gifts to everybody who doesn't appreciate it or doesn't know how to use it, right? It's like a guy walks over to Yosef and says, Yosef, I want to borrow money. And Yosef says, no problem, come, I'll give you. The guy never shows up to him, never comes to his house. He sees him the next day, he says, oh, I want to borrow money. He says, why didn't you come to my house? Okay, I'm going to come today. Again, the next day he doesn't come. Every day he says, I want it. I have such people tell me, when's your shear? I tell them the time. Every week, they never show up. It's the people who ask me what time the shear is, I know they're not coming. This is unfortunately the way it is. But the people who want, they're there. What do we learn? That you have to show that you want. And this is how you do Ani L'Dodi. Hashem, I love you. I come and got my comfort zone to do you. I want to do your ratzon. I want to do for you. Hashem says, you want to do for me? Here, I'm going to give you the ability to do it. I'm going to give you the ability to become great. The ability to do these things. This is what the pasuk is teaching us. So we had 2 lessons on this pasuk. How the Yetzer Hara acts and how we are supposed to confront the Yetzer Hara. Well, let's move on to our last lesson on this week's Parshat. In this week's Parshat, we learn about Shluach HaKan. Right? This is Pasuk Ki Kareh Kan Tzipor Lefanecha Baderech. One of the 74 mitzvot that are found in Parshat Ki Teitze is the mitzvah of Shluach HaKen, which is sending away the mother bird of a kosher species. And then you take the eggs. Many reasons are given. And the Pasuk says it's going to lengthen your days on this earth. It's to be good for you and prolong your days. The Ramban says, and it's also Sefer HaChinuch, that the reason for this mitzvah is not showing us how much Hashem has mercy on His creatures and that He doesn't want the mother to be the one to take the eggs, but rather to teach us how to be merciful. Sefer HaChinuch does this with many mitzvot over and over again. He says the sharish of the mitzvah, the tam of the mitzvah, what the lesson you're supposed to learn from this mitzvah. And the Ramban says it as well, is to teach us how to be merciful and compassionate. Hashem gave Klal Yisrael mitzvot to mold and shape their midot, right? Similar, think about it, just very similar. Friday night we cover the halot, right, before we make the kiddush, right? Why we do that? In order not to embarrass the halot. Embarrass the halot don't feel anything. But it's in order to teach us not to embarrass people. The same thing here, by this mitzvah, is to teach us how to be compassionate and merciful according to people. You have to be compassionate to eggs, to mother, to birds. So the same thing, you have to be compassionate to people. The Gemara tells us, Baba Metzia, an incident that happened to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. A calf was being taken to the slaughterhouse to be shechted. And it ran to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So it was trying to get saved, doesn't want to be shechted. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sees the calf, and he tells him, go to the slaughterhouse. This is why you were created, to be shechted and eaten. What happens after this? Gemara tells us that for 13 years, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was in crucial pain. He was in very, very severe pain. Why? Because he didn't have Rahmanut to this calf. Until when? Until one day there was a baby weasel that ended up in his house. And they wanted to throw the baby weasel out. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't let them just, knock him out. He said, you have to show Rahmanut to this weasel. And when they saw this, in heaven they said, it was a litter of baby weasels, a whole thing of baby weasels. And when they saw this in Shemayim, they said, since he shows mercy, we'll show him mercy too. And they took away his pain. The Maharasha explains, what was Rebbe's mark? What was so cruel about his remark about saying, go to the slaughter, that's what you were created for? The Maharasha says, that the truth is, the cow, yes, it's supposed to be slaughtered. But this was a young calf. It was young. It could have worked, it could have done things, and eventually when it gets older, then it's time to be shechted and be eaten. But because Rebbe said this, he didn't have any feelings for him. This caused him pain and suffering. The mitzvah to be rahmanut to everything, all the creatures in the world, including the bird in this week's parasha, the mitzvah that we have, in order to teach us how to have feelings and how to be nicer. Rav Pam, with deep sadness, would recall an incident of a kollel wife who came to him crying in tears. She said her husband was a tremendous masmid, great learner, who spent every minute immersed in Torah. But unfortunately, he was so involved in Torah that whenever she asked for help, he said, the house is your department. You wear the skirt. I am ach v'rak b'Torah. Just and only Torah. I don't do anything in the house. And it led her to having tears and to crying. And Rav Pam would say that this husband, this big masman, he was a cruel, cruel husband, and he was unquestionably incorrect, and he was inappropriate for what he did. He says, while hasmada is a wonderful attribute, being very involved in Torah and always learning, the husband must realize there's a time and place for everything. It says that all the Torah is darchei no'am. It's all supposed to be pleasant. You have to know when to be a masmid. You have to know when to close the Gemara, go help your wife. The halacha is, if there's a mitzvah that only you can do, then you have to close the Gemara and go do it. That means, if your wife needs help, right? Who else is supposed to help her? Now, if she has her mother, or your mother, or a sister, and that, and they're around, they're helping, that's great. But not everyone has that support. They live in different places, and they only have each other. Who else is supposed to come? The neighbor's husband is supposed to come? It's supposed to be the husband. At this point, he has to help. Now the truth is, the more the wife tries to take things on her, she'll get a special sati de shemai, special help from heaven to help her out. And she won't need her husband so much if he's really, really studying the Torah all the time. They know that. They know that because they'll come to them as well. But if the husband's playing around in the shul, he's not really learning and stuff like that, that extra sati shemai won't come. It has to come from both. She has to send and he has to learn. But at the same time, even though the sati shemai extra heaven help will come, there'll still be times that he has to step in. But they have to work it out, the schedule-wise and everything. But to Chas v'Shalom say, I don't do this. Forget about what you saw, Amol, once your grandfather, he never walked into the kitchen. He didn't know where the kitchen was. Or he didn't know, he doesn't wear an apron. I don't wear this, I don't wear that. This things, right? This gav, this talk already was a long time ago. And even then it wasn't true. Rav Smith says he remembers coming to see Rav Pam right after his Chatunah on the Motzei Shabbat. He comes to Rav Pam's home. Rav Pam opens the door. He's wearing an apron and he's having the vacuum cleaner and he's cleaning the house. This is the Rosh Yeshiva. He's sitting on the Agudas Yisrael Motzei Torah He's sitting on one of the greatest rabbis in America. Everyone's listening to him, and he's at home washing dishes, vacuuming the floor. What does that mean? Rosh Hashiva cannot do things. People have a very weird understanding. They think that an Adam Gadol is someone who sits 24/7 and doesn't do anything. No, that's also an Adam Gadol. But there's more Adam Gadol in the world. Rav Pam was an Adam Gadol, no one argued. And he worked in the house. Did he do it every week? I don't know. Nobody knows. But he did it, that's for sure. This is what we have to know as well.
So the Huna, all those, they did it on a weekly basis. Shabbat.
That's right. They worked at home. They did stuff. They prepared the fish. They prepared the salad. They did the things. 100% every week. Everybody knows their stuff. No one should ever use the Torah as an excuse not to help out at home. No one should ever use the Torah as an excuse not to do appropriate things. And the Torah should never be used in a way that's unpleasant. The Torah is Darchei Noam. It's considered a pleasant Torah. If a person uses it wrongly and people get a bad taste from that, it's very, very unfortunate. It's very, very, very bad. A person to be very careful. Such behavior, it's like this husband that said, I'm not going to help. The truth is, it's very rare. Most husbands are very nice, or they try to be very nice. Might not always come across that way, but they usually are good people. But the vast majority of B'nai Torah understands this. But during these weeks of Elul, during these weeks of Rosh Hashanah, we know that Hashem judges us the way we are with other people. Midah keneged midah. You're nice, Hashem's nice to you. You're mean to people, Hashem will be mean to you. Therefore, I think it's very incumbent upon us that when we deal with people, especially at our spouses and our family, we all know, I tell this story a million times. People, it's always easier to help outside people. You know, you get a better feel from it. You know, outside people tell you thank you more. They talk about you more. If you do favors at home, it's not that much recognized. You may not get a big thank you. And you may not be applauded as much as you did it for some stranger. Right? The story goes that there was a man walking down the street and he sees a lady with 1,000,000 bags. So he runs over to her and says, can I help you? Can I help you? And she says, oh, Moish, thank you for helping me. He looks up, he sees it's his wife, he says, oh, Malki, it's just you. It's okay. He leaves her the bags and runs away. Okay? This is unfortunate. This shouldn't be that way. The way it's supposed to be is the person has to help more at home. I know, it's difficult. They're always asking for more. The stranger asks one time, then he doesn't ask again for a long time. We understand all that. That's why this is the real Chesed. This is the mitzvah of Torah. Each mitzvah is teaching us how to behave better, how to act better. So quickly review the 3 lessons that we learned from this week's Parshat. Lesson number 1, we learned is that first it's oyevecha, you have many enemies. And then it's untano, Hashem puts it into one. Because it's really Yetzer shows himself as 1,000 enemies, all different Yetzerot, but then in the end of the day it's just one. It's just the Yetzer himself. We learned all the different tricks that he did. Then we learned that if you go out, Hashem will help you get him in. Hashem will help you win the war. You have to have strategy. That means learning Torah, Tefillah, Tzedakah. We learned this from Yaakov Avinu. And then, our third and final lesson is to be kind, to be compassionate with all our dealings and everybody that we see and everybody that we encounter. And with this, Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh to Mashiach Tzidkenu. We should be zocheh to the Yom Hadin, where we're going to get a good judgment. It's going to be a judgment for a year. It's going to be Be'ezrat Hashem of Year Haim Tovim. It's going to be a year of everything that we need. Yeshuot, Nechamot. Be'ezrat Hashem, Rabotai. It's really close to Rosh Hashanah. It's already time. Shabbat Shalom.